Okay, welcome back. I'm Bob Jennings, and you are listening to HawgCast. I'm here with Brigadier General Steve Nasty Nestor, the wing commander, and a few other people who just came back from a trip to Peru, showing the Air Force just how effective a reserve-led deployment can be. But before we introduce those folks, it is
nasty time.
And I tell you what, sir, what a great UTA weekend we just had.
It was awesome. The weather wasn't cooperating too well, but we managed to have a good time.
Could have been better, but I think we persevered, and it was a great weekend nonetheless. Family Day was incredible, number one, so definitely thank you to the Booster Club for putting that on.
It was, yeah. A lot of people to thank for Family Day. The 442nd Booster Club, who some of you see cooking every UTA to raise money. I think they raised somewhere to the tune of $15,000 to $20,000, and that money went to the food vendors that were out there, the rides for kids that were out there, the Johnson County Fairgrounds place that we had it at. Outstanding event. Mandy Speaker, Stewards from the command post, several people from the command post that helped pitch in. All the shirts. The Rising Six raised some money out there with their jail. The dunk tank that shirts did was cold, but it was fun. Chiefs added some stuff to it, some commanders. There's a lot of people pitching in to help our families and our airmen have a great time. We even had the chaplain's brother from down by Joplin, Missouri, I think, Webb City. The guys from the Elks Club, I think they brought 30 people up. They cooked brats for us. They manned the beer tent, drove 2 hours just to help our airmen have a good day. The folks from Independence, the VFW Hall in Independence, that donate a bunch of bikes to us and clothing for our Christmas store. They rode down in their Harley-Davidson clothing, and they celebrated with us as well. The folks from MVETS over in Knob, that we have some retirement ceremonies at. I think that Melanie and her husband, I forget his first name, Johnson, Hank Johnson, yeah. They donated $3,000 from MVETS for that event. Again, we're going to thank them down the road as well. But awesome Family Day. From the family days of the past, what that's transformed into, for me personally, to see it come to that kind of level with the kids having a good time, I think it's gotten better and better every year.
Yeah, I was just talking to the major this morning, and we were saying that for the last 3 or 4 years, every year it's been better than the last. And no pressure next year, Booster Club, but we expect big things.
Bob, you started that Family Day off with the national anthem. That's some of the best pipes I've heard in a long time.
You know what? You guys can't see this because it's an audio format, but I am blushing.
Bob got to sing the national anthem. He stepped up as the MC. Did you actually write the words down, or did you have them memorized?
I actually have heard it once or twice before, so I did do it from memory, and I always feel like if I were ever to sing the national anthem a lot, that I would want to have the words written down, because you get up there are hundreds of people, and it makes you nervous.
Yeah.
You know? And I've seen people flub it before, and I always felt terrible for them, so I always thought, you should write the words down, have something to look at so you can keep your place. But I was not expecting to sing the national anthem when I showed up yesterday, but I guess the lead singer of Twisted Fate, who killed it again every year.
She's good.
I guess she wasn't feeling quite up to it yesterday, so they needed somebody to step in, and the band didn't all know it in the same key. And I didn't know it in any key. I just happened to remember the words. So it was a full-on a cappella experience. That was fun, and tens of people clapped.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
Hey, also, I'll just recap kind of what happened this weekend since we're doing this post-UTA. The Chiefs had a great social Friday night at the club, thanks to those guys. And we're going to continue to do that, maybe quarterly, maybe have one at the MVET's place to give them a little business. They need another bartender over at the O Club, though. The line's too long to get a beer. So that one bartender for 60 people doesn't cut it. Hey, congrats to you. The Master Sgt. Strat list came out yesterday, and you were top 25%.
Thank you.
In the wing. So to all you folks that made it, I won't mention all of them by name. Congrats. That's a big achievement. I think there's about 100 Master Sergeants in the 442nd, and we recognize the top 25%. And I think the number one Master Sergeant grade out was Gonzo Gonzalez from Security Forces, who's now an XP. So that's good stuff. So congrats to those guys. Rick Mitchell McGraw had his Fenny flight. I got to partake in that myself. I flew in it. I have not seen a crowd of that size at anybody's Fenny flight, which tells you to the type of people person and the type of person leader that that McGraw has been, not only as a 303rd commander, but also when he worked in XP, he got to know guys like Gonzo and Bo Lander and the folks that he worked with in the wing. He naturally just connects with people outside of the fighter squadron and does a great job. We're going to miss him, which leads me to the guy sitting next to me, Colonel B-Light Leiter, who's coming back. McGraw's going out to do the same job as B-Light did in PACAF. And B-Light got here in 1996 as a crew chief. And he's been in this unit and left 2 years ago when he made 06 to go out to Hawaii, and now they're kind of swapping. When you make 06, they want you to kind of get out of your wing and go do a staff job. Then a lot of times you get to come back or to another flying job. So B-Light, tell us what you did over in PACAF and then a little bit of history of your history here in the 442nd.
Yeah, I joined the 442nd in 1996 as an A-10 crew chief. My wife was on active duty here, so once we got married, we settled here in Missouri, joined the reserves, and went to basic training tech school, came back. I did want to fly. I had flown right out of high school and gotten my commercial and instrument. So joined the reserves crew chief, doing the UTAs, but also going back to school at UCM to get my aviation degree. All the while telling all the pilots, hey, I want to be one of you and fly as well. So once I finished my 4-year degree, I went up for a board and was luckily selected to go to pilot training, come back and fly the Mighty Hawg, which I did from 2001 till 2021, where I went out to the PACOM AOR, working for the Air Operations Center. At the Air Operations Center, we basically command and control all the aviation element within Indo-PACOM, which basically covers about 110 million square miles, so it's a very vast area of responsibility. So luckily, I was able to do well out there, and through the help of General Nestor and Colonel Leonas, I was asked to come back here to the 442nd, which I definitely consider home, and I'm just so blessed and happy to be coming back.
Awesome. I know we overlapped at PACAF a little bit. I remember B-Light's first couple of days at PACAF, and there was Russian ships all around Hawaii, and some bombers and fighters that we were intercepting around Hawaii. I had no concept of what goes on in PACAF before I started working there as far as the daily competition between China and Russia and ourselves. And I see B-Light after his first day at the AOC, and it was an interesting day of intercepts with Raptors and some Russian airplanes. And I'm like, welcome to PACAF, it's busy, huh? And he was like, holy cow, that was really interesting work. I couldn't believe all the stuff that was going on today, right?
Definitely opened my eyes to all that we have to do to protect American citizens around the world.
Awesome. That B-Light being a crew chief leads me to another thing that happened this weekend was the dedicated crew chief ceremony, which the second time we've done that. And it's basically a little bit of back and forth. The pilots are honoring their dedicated crew chief, and the crew chief gives them a coin, the pilot gives them a hatchet. B-Light was a previous crew chief, as was a guy like Scott Sims. Aaron Berry, Juicy, is another pilot. We wanted to maybe do a podcast with some pilots that have gone from the flight line to the cockpit, and maybe some current crew chiefs like Hunter Southern that's trying to become a pilot in the Air Force Reserves, and we're helping him out find that path to the cockpit as well. And some other guys that we're working with that go fly the sim, work with Bumpus, our sim instructor, and for those of you out there that are interested in it, I welcome to come over to the 303rd, get you in a sim, figure out how that process works to get cross-trained into that. There's been a lot of people showing interest. I had some CE guys that helped me remodel or redo our office space. We put him on mandates for 2 weeks, and Josh Schaefer, I think was his name. He's got 120 flying hours, works for Amazon. Very interested in becoming a pilot in the reserves. Didn't know how to do that. He was in my office. We just started talking, and I'm like, man, you need to go over to the 303rd, fly the sim, meet these young pilots, ask them how they did it. So he got to fly the sim yesterday, and he's really excited to try to further his career. Let's see, what else went on? We also had a lot of suicide and sapper training this weekend, so thanks to Jess Swanson for heading that up in a bunch of different groups and some group settings, and that stuff went well. And the one in the fighter wing staff, we had some good conversations and good stuff about taking care of people in that room, so I'd like to see that. Change command is going to be November 4th for Colonel Leonas and myself at 1100 on Saturday, the UTA. General Sabrick's going to come up and oversee that and visit our wing. It's our chance to show our wing off to her, the new 10th Air Force Commander. And I'm going to actually try to do a podcast with her. So this isn't my Fenny podcast, but I want to do a podcast with her, kind of brag a little bit about the wing to her, and I want to hear her vision for the future of the 442nd as our NAF commander and what she and Chief Bluto are doing to further our fighter mission past the A-10 in 4 or 5 years. So that'll be fun at next UTA. And we also had a weapons load competition that was cool. There was like the old guys against the active duty guys against the TRs, right? And Arts. Rio's got some stuff on that.
Yeah, hey, I'm also real glad to have B-Light come back, Colonel Leiter. He was my deputy ops group commander when I was the ops group commander. So we had a bomb build and a bomb load competition out on the flight line. 3 teams. When it comes to the bomb build, the geriatric team won. I guess they didn't deduct for Advil use. But the people on the team, it was 4 members. It was Chief Calhoun, Senior Master Sergeant Hamilton, Senior Master Sergeant Caldwell, and Senior Master Sergeant Select Griffin. So that's awesome that the geriatric team won the build, but quite honestly, our wing won the build because the winners built it in 9+30. And the third place team built it in 11:15. So those are all quick builds of 6 Mark 82 bombs by our builders. So that's awesome. And then when it came to the loading, TFI team won, which makes me happy. Consisted of an ART and 2 active duty Lobos. And let me see if I can read their names. Tech Sergeant McGee, Staff Sergeant Keys, and Staff Sergeant White. And I'm also waiting for Chevy to hopefully pass me who the dedicated crew chief of the year was. But he hasn't gotten back to me on the phone yet. But they gave that award out at the dedicated crew chief ceremony, as well as the quarterly award, as well as the monthly award. So the crew chiefs. One of the things I noticed at Patriot Fury is crew chiefs obviously have a huge role when it comes to taking care of the mission. They're the final QC, they called it, before the jet leaves with the pilot to conduct that part of the mission. But they're having to make pretty big decisions when it comes to if this jet goes or if it doesn't. And I see a lot of the crew chief corps turn into leaders in the Air Force. And when we were at Patriot Fury, we saw a lot of crew chiefs or former crew chiefs in leadership roles throughout the command, not just 10th Air Force. And that's kind of a example that you put out with the 3 pilots that came off the line and are in our fighter squadron now. I think that's a kind of a universal trend, and crew chiefs are leaders and step up and become leaders in the command. So that's kind of awesome that we had that ceremony. And I told my crew chief, hey, not only is it you're important for the mission, but you're important for my family. I fly this airplane more often day to day than in combat. And my wife and my kids appreciate what you guys do. So I think that's a real important thing to emphasize when we're talking about our crew chiefs.
Very good. Very cool. I think that wraps up the nasty time. We'll get into some Patriot Fury stuff. And before we kind of get into that, I'm sitting here with Lieutenant Colonel Yersak. Brandon Jewell was recognized as the DCC of the year, whose awesome. Father was a crew chief here too. It's really cool. Brandon's a great kid, and a really good crew chief. So I'm joined by Lieutenant Colonel Yersak, who, man, we just did his change of command last UTA. He's the new MSG commander, and what a career. 35 years, right? 35, Keith?
It says this month.
36. So Keith started out as an enlisted guy. I talked about it as change command. 17 years enlisted, I believe now 18 as an officer, all the way up to colonel. So from an airman to a colonel. So for those of you out there listening, you can go from airman to chief, like Chief Urbano is joining us, or you go from airman to colonel. Like we like to develop leaders in this organization. These are 2 guys that we've certainly developed. And Chief Urbano was in security forces as the chief over there, and he got selected to be the senior enlisted leader for the MSG to work for Colonel Yersak. I know, Sal, you had a couple. Not questions. You were a little leery of taking your hat off, is what I heard. Your security forces cap. Are you still going to be able to wear that as the MSG SEL?
You can, sir, and I don't plan on wearing it to show that I'm a chief for all the squadrons, not just security forces.
Awesome. Well, tell me a little bit, before we start on Patriot Fury, tell me a little bit about your background before you got to the 442nd, what you've done here in security forces, and then we'll talk about stuff you did over in Europe. I saw you in Spain. You were doing great work, and we'll get into Patriot Fury a little bit later.
Of course. I was active duty, only person in my family ever to join the military. Joined in 2000, was active duty for about 10 and a half years, deployed about 10 times in that time frame. Transitioned over to the 932nd at Scott Air Force Base. I was a reservist out there from 2010, deployed a couple times with them there, and I was security forces my entire time. Deployed everywhere: Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi, Kuwait, UAE, Africa. Loved them all. I got the opportunity to become the security forces manager with the 442nd Security Forces in September 2019. So I was in that position for 4 years before getting afforded another great opportunity in the 442nd MSG as the senior enlisted leader. I've never sought out opportunities. I live 10 minutes from Scott Air Force Base, but I have no plans on returning. Nothing against the base, but the family and the camaraderie that I've developed here it makes me want to come to Whiteman Air Force Base every single month.
Awesome.
So I think it's a great wing, an amazing wing, and and I'm learning a lot from all levels, from airmen to you, sir, the general. So it's a great base.
And what's your? I know you have a high up, like you're a GS 28 or something like that. What's your GS job? What do you do on the civilian side?
So on the civilian side, I'm our deputy director for the Central Region for Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency. I've been doing that for a little bit. My office actually sits in Dallas, but I was able to work out an arrangement where I can still live in St. Louis, and then they travel me down there 1 week a month to deal with all that. So we deal with all the clear defense contractors throughout the United States. My AOR that I cover is about 22 states, so it's a pretty big AOR. It keeps me pretty busy, a lot of multitasking, a lot of meetings, but I thoroughly enjoy it.
And that I noticed when I was in Spain with you, and Rio talked a little bit about Peru. Your expertise in that area is invaluable to when we go places that you can scout out and look for security issues to our airmen and help us with those things both in Spain and down in Peru, correct?
Correct, sir.
Yeah.
Just lots of training with it. Deployments also helped with that as well.
Good. All right, back to Keith before we get on Patriot Fury. So Keith, 17 years prior enlisted, his nickname when he was the exec for 10 years was Ninja. Need it now, just ask. He's like a Swiss Army knife. He can do anything. He's been an FSS, he's been an exec, LRS, now he's MSG commander. And he just gets stuff done. Like I talked about his trip. He went to Panama for 6 months on his AEF, and he ran a huge logistics train down there for the Army. And like I said, if I'm a one-star that's a CFAC or a lead wing commander in charge of a hub spoke system in Guam or in Europe or in CENTCOM, and I had to pick a logistics 4 guy to go with me to get stuff done, I'd bring Keith Yersak along with me. So tell me a little bit about what you did here before we start, Keith.
I'm not even sure where to start on that. So my background, again, was the FSS, 17 years there, and I pretty much worked every office within the FSS. And then, which, again, proving myself on the personnel side, Ops Group offered me a job as their executive officer, which got me a commission and moved me on. And then from there, again, 7 years with Ops as their Ops executive officer, time proving myself, wound up with 10 years as the wing exec. And then graduated into the LRS as the commander. And again, that's probably one of the most satisfying jobs I've ever had as far as being logistics and being part of the mission. And it just, I can't even explain that feeling, how involved that was and what I learned again. And then also being in charge of people. That was probably the first time that I was really in charge of people. From there, I did a 4-year stint roughly there, and again was asked to backfill in the IG shop, which is another important role, just making sure that people are compliant and doing the things that they need to do, and again building more relationships internally within the wing. And that also led to this next role that I'm currently in, which is the MSG commander. And again, just very humbling being in charge of 5 different organizations, being in charge of working along with the talent that is already in place there and their expertise. You know, it's a surreal feeling. And again, I'm looking forward to this next 3 years. We got some changes coming down the line, you know, as far as what our mission roles are going to be. You know, looking forward to guiding us through that path. And most importantly, after being gone on deployments and doing some things, I'm looking forward to developing airmen, and it's back to what B-Light was saying as far as seeing the mission after traveling the world and seeing the things that are going on there. And the closer I get to the end game, I'm feeling more passionate about passing it on, and I want the people to have the same passion that I have as I'm leaving. Anyway, I got 3 more years to take advantage of that, and I'm looking forward to it.
Good. All right. So you can see why Rio chose these two people to be his guys down in Peru. So let's rewind 2 years ago. Rio, I take over the wing. Rio and I go down to 10th Air Force MLR, and General Radcliffe, one of the first things he says to me is, your wing is going to be the lead wing for South America.
Yeah, he actually said it to the pilot meeting after your change of command.
That's right.
All the pilots were like, what are you talking about? We're going to Europe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I had already been in cahoots with General Suro, I was vice for before General Schultz. He was working in Europe, and I had contacted him. There's stuff going on in Europe with Ukraine and Russia. And I said, hey, we want to go train over in Europe. During my 2-year command, I want to get on an exercise over there and do some stuff like we did in Estonia or wherever. He finds this Defender Europe thing for us, and when Radcliffe said that, I'm like, oh no, I don't want to lose Europe for this, right, Rio?
Yeah, I mean, you were able to convince him, and obviously coordinate with the Luke wing commander, and were able to at least shift the aviation package.
So in another interesting conversation in my office, Rio was sitting there. I'm on a video teleconference with General Radcliffe, and I was pitching him the idea that we could do both. We're still going to go to Europe, sir. The DM guys are going to provide jets, and we'll still lead this Patriot Fury thing. And he goes, well, we're going to need an 06 to lead it. And I go, yeah, we'll find one. And he goes, how about Rio? Rio was sitting right there, and Rio was like, I'll do it. And I don't think he knew exactly what he was getting into. And to be fair, originally the original Projo was Stu Sims.
It was.
And I think that might have caused him to retire.
I think it was maybe one of the straws on the back, but we were planning this well prior. I know Keith was involved immediately, and your first site survey was
in March, sir.
In March, and then the initial planning conference was in April.
March of what year?
22. So bottom line is, as soon as I came back from, it was actually Honduras, from working with the JTF Bravo down there, I had like a 2-month reset, and because I pretty much was the SouthCon resident expert here, had a passport, it was like I had to, I won the passport lottery. So I was the lead of the initial site survey that went down to Ecuador, because we were going to Ecuador in the beginning. And I led 12 people, active duty and reserve, people down there, different subject matter experts for their areas, to do the initial site survey. And then we brought everything back for the IPC.
Did Deuce go on that with you?
Deuce did not. I was it.
Okay.
He led the second one. By then, everybody kind of knew the vector and was able to start getting their paperwork in, and we knew the direction we were going. So we started figuring out the passport and visa process, which continued to be a hurdle through the whole deal, actually.
So the tasking, just for you guys, why do we go to South America? Why do we do what we do?
I think that was, the whole concept of getting all 3 NAFs together. Borg will say, hey, this was a napkin discussion that he had with the other NAF commanders when he was the 10th Air Force commander.
Tell me what you're saying when you say 3 NAFs.
Okay, obviously we're in 10th Air Force, so that's the 10th NAF, and then in general, the C-130 reserve forces are in 22nd Air Force. And then the strategic airlift, which is tankers and C-17s and C-5s, are in 4th Air Force. So the 3 NAF commanders, General Borgen being the 10th Air Force one, and the 2 others were, probably at an MLR and probably in a bar, and came up with this great idea, which quite honestly, it was a good idea, to combine our reserve air power into one wing and deploy it.
To an air expeditionary wing.
Well, I don't think they knew it was that, but they wanted to do a project together. General Radcliffe, I would say, catalyzed it down into South America, because he was in MA out at 12th Air Force.
At Tucson, yeah.
Yep, and he knew the AO, and he knew the region, and he knew an exercise called Resolute Sentinel did this. So that pairing and his knowledge of that AO kind of glued it together. And
the reason we go to places like that is, 1, to help other countries out, 2, is maybe to project a little power, and 3 is to deny other countries that might be down there trying to sell military hardware, trying to build ports, trying to put space antennas, different things. So the Chinese are very heavily involved down in South America and Africa, all over the world. And allies and relationships are very important to the United States, and that was a big reason why we went down there, is to build relationships with these countries and build some allies and partners in another region that we usually don't go to, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The Peruvians fly Soviet fighters and such, and they all have Soviet-level weapon systems purchased when they were the Soviet Union. They have a lot of Chinese restaurants. They have camera systems in their cities that were provided free by China. And Ecuador has missile systems, and I'm trying to think they probably had Russian fighters or Soviet fighters that weren't running, pushed off the side. So absolutely, one of the objectives was to partner with these countries and let them understand. And we talked to, not the ambassador, but it was the consulate leader at Dallas, and she was very adamant that, hey, we have more in common with you. There's no ocean that separates the United States and Peru, and culturally there's more similarities. So she was adamant about this partnership making a lot of sense. It quite honestly did.
So Keith, you do the first planning conference down there, the site survey, and I'll get to Deuce and having to buy a $600 suit down there to meet some people on the second one. What were your biggest concerns? Did Chief Urbano go down there on the first one with you?
No, sir.
What were your biggest concerns? Originally, we were supposed to go to Ecuador and Peru. You come back from that site survey. What were your biggest concerns as a log planner?
It was the fact that we need to be smart about planning this, because any force that we were going to bring down there, these bases were not built for modern aircraft. So I was very adamant that we need to proceed with caution, because we were going to overwhelm not only the base's resources but the economy at each of the locations that we were at. And I think that's kind of a good reason why we did the kind of the hub and spoke concept, to kind of spread our forces out so we would be able to evenly distribute and have a sustainment while we were down there.
So you're talking hotels, you're talking food, you're talking security, you're talking the things they had on the bases we're looking at going to, correct?
Yeah, fuel was also the big one, and then they're just the facilities, the air bases, they were not built for modern aircraft, period. It was, you just had to tread lightly on what you were going to do and how you're going to do it, which was probably why it made the A-10 the perfect fit to go down there. The way it was set up and high off the ground, a lot of FOD, a lot of stuff, a lot of basic needs that were going to be needed while we were down there.
Tell me what for the listener out there that doesn't know what FOD is, what's FOD?
Just so the jets set higher with their engines up higher, so the rocks and debris and stuff, a lot of it, the jungle is overgrown around the airfield, and it could have sucked through the engine and damaged an aircraft.
Awesome. And so besides A-10s, what other aircraft we guys took down there?
Yeah, so we took 4 different aircraft down there. We took 4 A-10s, we took 3 C-130s, we took 2 KC-135 tankers, and we took 1 C-17. So it's kind of like, I'll call it a mini wing. You remember how we used to have composite wings?
Yep.
It's kind of similar to that, but it was actually on a smaller scale. And it was actually, in execution, quite effective. I would have liked 1 more C-17. I think that would have made it a more, sustainable situation. But, it was absolutely a very mobile, effective package. And if we had 2 more A-10s, we could have sustained longer as well to, in reality, project combat power away from main operating bases. And we were pretty effective at doing that.
And when did you get involved, Sal?
So I went on the second site survey in end of July, beginning of August. So that's when we went down to Ecuador, Peru, Panama, Ecuador, Peru. So that's where we were originally going to be. We were going to stage part of Panama, be in Ecuador, and parts of Peru.
And from a security standpoint, we ended up dropping Ecuador. But what were your concerns from a security standpoint for 550 American forces to go to these 2 countries?
So you had a couple. So you had the infrastructure. One, it was small, lots of gaps in their security measures for fences and lighting and stuff for the airfield is not like ours. Camera systems weren't there. Their security forces, minimal amount of ammunition that they can carry, training and stuff like that. Also, you have the heavily populated area, Ecuador, with cartel. So that was always my number one concern with that, was the presence of a whole bunch of Americans coming in thinking that they're going to go in the fight against drugs, which was not the case. We were just there for a partnership training exercise. So to me, those were the biggest ones. And obviously the driving conditions for the way they drive and the way we drive is completely different.
Because we're not staying. The facilities weren't there to stay on base, correct? We stayed in hotels.
Well, eventually, initially the main base was Manta, and like he talked about security measures. All the light bulbs were burned out on the overhead lights. The back or the west fence wasn't. It was basically a bank that went into the ocean, and logistically, there were hotels in the city, but they were very far away. And as one of the DE agents talked about the best one, he said, yeah, the drug cartels like this hotel too. So just some huge force protection issues that were kind of difficult. So we were going to stay in dorms, and the dorms were, and this is kind of a trend with some of the countries down there, they get things and they don't really maintain them like we do. So the dorms were moldy, the beds were not in really good shape, and eventually we were going to, well, not eventually, but the plan was to throw money at the dorms to basically strip all the stuff that had mold in it. Well, luckily we didn't end up going here because I don't think we would have gotten over this hurdle. Fix the air conditioner, fix the plumbing, and stay on cots. Cots supplied from your old base Grissom, but we're gonna have 2 people per room on cots, and I would have passed away down there if we were living on cots. But yeah, it was difficult. And additionally, we were going to go to Quito, which if you look, do some Google searches on Quito, there's places that are State Department no-go zones in the town of Guayaquil. Guayaquil, a huge drug port. It was just, we were going to get escorted by Marines to the hotel there. So it's just, these are just the highlights of some of the force protection issues and some of the bed down issues. I don't know how we were going to get gas there, but it was just a huge planning factor. And the planning, I would say, you're talking about the first couple of sites. I would say in the beginning it wasn't as frantic, but as we identified more and more logistical problems, it just kind of apexed when we were planning for Ecuador.
So we just said we didn't end up going to Ecuador, but the president of Ecuador got assassinated either before or right after our trip down there. Is that correct?
It was before. It was before we left.
Okay.
And that's when the movement from one to the other happened. I'm pretty sure you got impeached first. Yeah. And then that's when the movement, once the loss of control, that is when they decided to move us from Ecuador to Peru.
Peru only.
Yeah, it was the ambassador at Ecuador. I think it was before the actual impeachment, and then obviously there's been some assassinations since for, election candidates and stuff like that. But it was a pretty interesting shot in the face when they said, you're not coming to Ecuador anymore.
Okay, so let's fast forward. Now we're done with our you go down there a second time with Sal and Deuce. Deuce is the lieutenant colonel, and they want him to meet some Ecuadorian or Peruvian leadership, correct?
Yes, it's Ecuadorian at the time. Again, we're still projected to go to Ecuador, and he had to provide a speech and a PowerPoint presentation as far as what Patriot Fury was about. We were still trying to sell it at the time. Why do they want us there? So he was in charge of selling it.
He was actually the backup.
Yeah, he was. Yes, exactly.
The primary was a 12th Air Force active duty guy who spoke Spanish.
Yes, sir.
And this presentation was going to be in Spanish.
Oh, jeez. And
it was to the U.S. ambassador and probably Secretary of State.
Just same level on the Ecuadorian side, whatever that would be. I can't remember at this time.
So he couldn't do it in his flight suit, so he had to go out and buy a suit?
Yeah, well, his bags got lost.
Oh,
he had to buy all new stuff. So his bag, I'm not sure exactly how his bags got lost, but they did, and he had to scramble.
Did he put that on his DTS voucher?
I believe he did.
He did. Yeah, but American Airlines didn't deliver his bag, so he had his travel clothes and that's it. Went out and bought I think an $800 or $700 suit, and had to brief this Spanish-centric PowerPoint presentation to high dignitaries. And he did great.
He nailed it. And every other, so we had dedicated aircraft. So a C-130, rather than traveling, go by ground, and because it was a little painful to travel by ground there, but we had a dedicated C-130, and we would stop at each one of these, do our site surveys, and meet the leadership. And Deuce, he nailed it. He was. I couldn't have been more proud to be with somebody. He did a great job.
Good. So you get done with the second trip. We kind of start planning. Tell me. I know you guys were on these VTCs like 3-4 times a week. Tell me about the pace and the amount of planning, weekly planning that went into this trip. You're working with 12th Air Force in Arizona, you're working with the FGC at Air Force Reserve Command, you're working with the 4th and 22nd Air Force staff. You have a staff you're building. Tell me about how often you met and how many VTCs you think you did weekly or monthly.
Like I mentioned, it started off, I would say, at a reasonable pace, and then it just kind of accelerated as we got closer, and it seemed like each conference we'd go to, we'd identify another half dozen critical problems. I would say initially we were talking every 2 weeks. What I'd like to say about the team is, obviously we had a huge participation with the 442nd Fighter Wing. Obviously Keith ended up being basically the A1 and the A4 Chief Urbano was the command chief. Sergeant Cortez was the first sergeant down there. But Zero Waring from Moody was our A3, and he was absolutely critical to that. Our JAG, Tom Schmidt, was our chief of staff of the walk. Obviously, Bob went and was running PA out of Chiclayo.
I forgot you went too, Bob.
Our
It was a
security,
great time.
yeah, he did great. Our security forces was majority from Whiteman, both at Lima, and I think we had DM mostly at.
There was a Hill Air Force Base crowd that went to.
That was the porters. We did. Yeah, we had porter support.
Yeah, I mean, we had members from Air Force Reserve Command from, I'm guessing, 40 to 50 units when you came all out. But we, I would say, had the largest component when it came to leadership. Am I missing anyone?
No, we had roughly 70 people from this base supporting that exercise. So
Yeah.
we had a large footprint, but we did have to orchestrate a lot with the other 3 NAF agencies and their supporting entities too.
And the team that came together from all these different organizations, and specifically the 3 NAFs, typically from the staff, ended up being a perfect team, is the best way to describe it. And I think it's because they were all bought in. So many people were told to help plan and help make this happen, and those people that weren't bought in would disappear. They'd send one email to jump on one Teams meeting, and then you'd never hear from them, even though they were being directed to help. But the team that came together were all bought in, and absolutely, I'll call it a perfect team. I think there were some serious voids when it came to our expertises, specifically in the. I don't know, the 4. We kind of were always throwing darts at the 4, not supporting us like we needed to.
The 4 would be maintenance logistics.
Logistics,
Yeah.
The maintenance side of it. And that's where, the Air Force is kind of not aligned with the joint force structure. When you say 4, what do we all think? I think maintenance, right?
Yeah.
Not anymore, to tell you the truth. I think logistics. And, when you say 4 to an Army guy, he doesn't think aircraft maintenance, or he thinks logistics. And we're look at our 4s on the NAF staff. Maintenance officer, maintenance officer, maintenance officer. So we're kind of not quite right when it comes, and we saw that. We were throwing a 4, and it was a maintenance officer, where I should have been thrown a high-level LRO, which, quite honestly, are not the 4s. We're not promoting the 4s in the Air Force like we should. But we got a great team, and I think we really, since the bottom, you talked about effective teams, we ended up being like a highly effective, cohesive team. Good friends, still to this day. We were texting professionally and personally the entire year because of the people that stepped up and wanted this to happen.
That's cool. The wing, you're talking 70 people from this wing. I'm thinking to myself, wow, we're planning this thing to leave in July. And Sal, you went on both trips, right?
I did. Yes, sir.
So
Yes.
we also took 10 jets and 250 people to Greece and Spain in May, 2 months before this. So tell me, from a reservist perspective, how do you, A, why did you volunteer for both trips? B, how did your civilian employer let you get that much military leave to go to Spain for 3 or 4 weeks and then to Peru for a month? And C, your wife must be very patient and tolerant to let you do all this stuff that you're doing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So good support system, but it went from August, July, so that was my daughter's birthday. So we got to wish her happy birthday in Panama and in Ecuador. So that's how I sold it to her. So I went on that site survey. Then we went to all the other planning conferences. I went on a site survey to Greece and Spain in November, then a planning conference in December, planning conference in January. Another one, a site survey. I was in Mexico for a personal trip, flew to Dallas from Mexico to meet with them all, to go on a site survey, came home, and then got ready to go to Spain like a couple days later. But selfishly, the Spain one was, who wouldn't want to go to Spain, right? But it was one, awesome for the opportunities. The Spain one was great because I got to sit and talk with all the maintenance folks, pilots folks, medical folks, ammo folks, all of those different types of disciplines that I've never really had the ability during a UTA weekend. So I got to learn a lot about all of their jobs. And I thought that was probably the most fascinating part of it. Yeah, I was in Spain, that was awesome. But just getting to know mainly the people in the 442nd. So just me working with my deployer, but I was able to multitask, still answer emails on both fronts. So a lot of late hours, busy time, dual tasking. But it was opportunities I wouldn't pass up on. I would do it all over again.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd shape some trips a little bit different, but I would do it all. It was just a great opportunity.
This is what Chief Barron and I talk about when we bring people that are new seniors, senior master sergeants or chiefs sometimes, and we bring them in. We're like, what are you doing outside of security forces or ammo or LRS to broaden yourself, right? And what you just told me is how much you, and I think it's about relationships, right? And when I stepped out of the fighter squadron, I didn't even know we had LRSC. I mean, I did, but I didn't know the quality of people that work in those organizations. And I have relationships with those people like I probably should have, like we did with the dedicated crew chief thing yesterday. So you've built relationships. So, man, you're setting yourself up to be a command chief of a wing because of all the things that you've learned in the last year about how a wing runs, correct?
Correct, and it comes from leadership as well, right? So I had individuals put me in those situations. Colonel Leonas selected me as his command chief, and I was pretty set on, I'm good just being the security forces lead. And he said, you're my command chief. And I always learned it, even at an airman level, you don't argue with the colonel, you just say, yes, sir, and you move on. But that was an experience for me to get out of my comfort zone. And that's what I challenge everybody to do, is get out of their comfort zones, because I learned a lot, because wherever he was, I was. So I got to see things at the big picture, high level things I wasn't always afforded the opportunities to. So I got to see all the planning and stuff that he had to deal with. And combined, our Spanish was not good together, so we put them together. It didn't make it any better. So
what's Urbano, Italian?
It is.
Okay.
So, but I know more Spanish than Italian, which is bad.
You need to go. I had Wes Peel when Chief Barron couldn't make it for a couple things. Wes, with the Secretary of the Air Force visit, tagged along with me. Got to go to the dinner, got to go meet him, learned a lot. Chief Dundas has gone with me to a couple 10th Air Force MLRs. Maybe you should do that with Rio if Chief Barron can attend something. I think he'd be a perfect fit to go just to get a thing of how 10th Air Force is working.
Yes, sir.
Cool. Back to the trip, Rio. So, and Keith, done with the second one. This thing almost got canceled like 3 times. Tell me why it almost got canceled completely, and then how you. I think it went because you 3-4 guys in the room here and would not let this thing be canceled.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I had 3 opportunities to back out of this easily, maybe 2 easy ones. The first one was a money issue in January, right before, it was like right at the beginning of the year, not fiscal year, calendar year. 12th Air Force basically, there was one individual at 12th Air Force that kind of made this difficult, and it's complete negative leadership. And the individual, they wanted to maintain control over certain planning functions, but they didn't want to plan it for us. So it's bizarre how we had to deal with that. That complication. Anyways, teams, we had, like he said, I had probably a dozen team meetings a week. And at one of this teams meeting basically said, I don't have enough money for both the special operations side and the Patriot Fury side. Because Resolute Sentinel is the overarching exercise, and there were 2 big components, Army Special Forces and Afric Patriot Fury. And he basically was toxically throwing out that I know I'm gonna cut one, I'm gonna save money, and I know which one I'm gonna cut. And he didn't say it to everybody, but he basically said one of us is gonna get cut. And at that point, we could have easily leaned into being cut and being not the person that went. But I started to backdoor it with the JTF commander, who's a B-1 NAV, who is in Tucson, doesn't work on 12th Air Force, but made sure that he understood that this guy, this GS at the planning at 12th Air Force can't cut Afric's primary exercise, number 1 priority for Afric, just because he wants to. He needs to coordinate this, quite honestly, through his commander, which is a 2-star, a NAV commander, and you need to be talking to General Radcliffe, who is the force provider, our NAV commander, our 10th Air Force commander, and he probably needs to bounce it off that General 3-star General Healy. You can't just do it, GS employee. And kind of backdoored it, and the funny thing is we went from the half not in favor to the only half they got, because the special operations group basically realized that this was an unstable exercise because of this guy, and they needed it for real-world certifications. Because we do the certification exercise. This was their certification exercise, so they pulled out before they could have cut us. But I would have said that if I would have said, "Hey, yeah, we're out," we would have been out at that point. But it was quite the opposite, and we said, "Hey, no, you can't pull us here. This is a big deal, and you can't just say no." And the second time, we talk about, "Hey, plan in Ecuador," but we were in Peru. End of March, Ecuador said, "You're not coming," and it was like we were well deep planned into our plan. We had 3 months left. And we could easily said, we're done. I can't re-vector into Peru with this short amount of time. And General Radcliffe actually called me at home. And, I heard rumors that this was happening, so I had about 24 hours of prep to think it through. We had one planning conference and then a site survey already like in a week and a half, ready to go. So, we could have done, and it was like our final planning conference and our final site survey to Ecuador. And, I figured we could make it a re-planning conference and a initial site survey into Peru. And we basically had a week, maybe and a half to figure that out. And I told him, hey, sir, we got to try. And that was my quote. It's like, I could say we're done, but I told him, sir, we got to try. These happen to be conveniently aligned. Let's give it a shot. And we went to Dallas. We reorganized what we were going to do, and then we tried to scramble to get our visas. We actually had visas to Peru because we were going to go on that site survey, which had a small stop in Peru, but we re-vectored the entire site survey into Peru, and within 2 weeks, replanned. It was a tough turn. That's for sure. Hi, G. Keith, your comments.
Yeah, that's when the games began, because to travel into a foreign land, it's not just a passport that you need, but it's also the visas. Things just fell into place. I mean, what were the odds of us having a Peruvian consulate in Dallas, that was willing to help, and that helped, again, push our visas through the process to get everybody down there and kind of pave the way for us. Gas was another big deal going into Peru. We had it all doped out going into Ecuador, as far as because A10 needs certain types of gas additives in the gas. So we had all that figured out going into Ecuador. We had to shift gears and come up with the game plan for Peru, who was not able to support it on the economy. We had to figure out how to get additives down there, fuelers, POL people that were smart in the game to do the additives to the gas. Wound up having to find the assets, make some sacrifices to some of the equipment that we had, in play to come down and support us. Had to sacrifice those so we find and get some R11s. And all this was happening within a month, 4 weeks, when we're trying to make this happen to be successful.
What's an R11? Tell us.
R11 is a fuel truck for aircraft.
And then what? You're talking Jet A? They had to add, what additives they have to put in Jet A so the A10 they just can't take regular jet fuel for an A10?
No, you have to have icing inhibitor, a static
Dissipator.
Yes, dissipator, and then corrosion control. So those are the three things that need to be in A10 fuel. We did get a waiver. We were working a waiver simultaneously just in case that we weren't able to come through with the additives and how to get them down there. But again, the team came through, got it together. Again, back to really smart people.
Yeah. And Keith jumped way ahead. I mean, when we went into Peru for our final site survey, luckily the infrastructure was better. And, we were going to stay on the economies and hotels. But we shifted to the enormous metroplex of Lima, 11 million people, and that Air Force base was really nice. And then where we went, majority of we basically had a MOB, which was Lima International Air Force Base, the military annex there, and we had two FOBs. One was Chiclayo, and Captain Quinez Air Force Base, I think that's the name, and that's an old MiG base. MiG-29s there, and that infrastructure was reasonable, and the town was large, so we were able to hit hotels there, and they were fine. And then we had the base that we were going to use out of Ecuador, Talara Air Base, which is a Su-25 base well up north, as our kind of our FARP location, and where we actually fought the war with the Su-25s, which is a Soviet A-10 equivalent, basically, and KT-1s, which is a light attack aircraft made by Korea. So the infrastructure was a little bit better, but the fuel problem, because initially, if you recall, 12th Air Force said, we'll have the same fuel contract. It was the same company, as Ecuador, and it just degraded, and I was like, I don't trust this 12th Air Force gig. And it degraded to the point that, like a month out, they said, we don't have fuel for the A-10s. And then we talked about getting the additives shipped in, and no one really took control of that. And they were all over the world because they had to source them from as far away as the Mideast and Hawaii. They were trying to aggregate them and get them down there. And someone said, hey, let's send 2 fuel trucks down there. And then it got bizarrely complex. We thought we were going to be able to mix the additives in one of their delivery trucks, but they wouldn't let us do that. So we'd use our delivery trucks, but they wouldn't let us pump gas into our trucks. It just every 3 days, we had a showstopper curveball in the gas.
With gas.
And no kidding, the gas plan was not solved until the day prior to the A-10s leaving Moody. I moved the A-10s to Moody without a final solution on the gas.
Jeez.
And I went over with the A-10 squadron commander, and we actually saw that we were going to be able to get gas one time at the little regional airport at Chiclayo there. But yeah, it's crazy. We ended up, our primary fuel plan was to buy gas, because we couldn't contract gas apparently. That's again one of the curveballs. Buy gas using the air card, which is a credit card for cross countries basically, from C-17 or C-130. Take that airplane, fly it up from Lima to the Chiclayo Air Base, download it from that airplane into a fuel truck that we flew in, throw the additives in with, no kidding, a funnel we bought at a hardware store there. At one point he was using a what do you call it, a gallon milk jug to put the additives in, test the fuel, and then deliver the fuel. And it was just, that was our, Max was the gentleman that was the pro with the POL. Who was the other guy?
It was Max Miller and Thaddeus Jones.
Yeah.
There were two local experts on that. And then there was two from Moody too.
Yep, and just the fact that those guys were there. And then I'll throw props out to Chief Matthews, who's a 10th Air Force in the A4. He happened to be on the Joint Task Force staff, and he was able to help us put the final puzzle pieces together. But every 3 days, there was an absolute showstopper. So I could have probably said no. And here's the funny thing. The Friday before we started moving the airplanes, that guy from 12th Air Force shoot me an email and he said, "You should cancel." And he did. And then I was like, "Are you kidding me?" And it was just like to me and a couple other people. And I basically did a reply. I added a few pins. I was like, this is my line to cancel, which was basically the day prior to leaving from Georgia. And he said, he made I'll call it a toxic comment, deleted all the other people just to me, basically said, "You're a fool." Is best summary.
Jeez.
Yeah. I don't think they ever thought we were going to get past the passport visa hurdle to make this happen anyway. I really don't. Just back to kind of the support that we received from that end.
Yeah, that's what one of the things I always say. I hate commanders that don't try to get the yes. They just say no, and then they're done.
Yeah, this guy was not a commander, and there's a reason why.
Hey, I'm going to pause this for a second, and when I get back, we'll talk about when you left for Peru and dates, and then when the jets came down there and some of the stuff you did down there.
Awesome.
All right, we're back. So the trip's to go. Give me the dates of the trip, when the A-10 and when the whole exercise is supposed to be.
All right. It was a 2-week exercise, and I think 8 July. I'm pulling a calendar right here.
8 July to 25 July.
Something like that. It was kind of lesson learned. Don't schedule a exercise that we have to bring in a lot of things that conflicts with
July 4th.
July 4th.
That's what I was getting to. So you guys left like the 26th or 8th of June, correct?
So the CRT team, the
Open the airfield.
the contingency response team, they showed up on the 26th and opened the airfield with I believe it was combat comm. So there's a small footprint that started on the 26th. Then we had the leads, so kind of a pre-advon, we call it the torch team, show up on the 28th, and that was the leadership team. And again, best practice, great call on that one, because like he was saying, we had stuff that was still open items that we had to work through, particularly the fuel. If we hadn't been there in advance of everything going on, and the team that was in place and worked through those issues, I'm not sure if we would have been ready when the combat portion of this.
Was that all you went to
Yes,
on,
sir.
on the 28th?
Yes.
What issues did you have when you got down there before the jets were coming?
So the main issue we had that we had no clue about was we walked right into a Peru holiday week.
Yeah.
So as soon as we got there, their base was shut down. So we had we lost a Thursday, Friday as soon as we were there. So trying to plan and look at the base, Colonel Sanchez allowed us. He put some folks out there so we can go out there, but it was limited footprint. So comm was out there, so combat comm, so they were able to get their stuff up. But we were working with a skeleton crew from the Peruvians, so we walked right into a holiday weekend, and then obviously the 4th of July, which is only a weekend in the United States, so that was a holiday there, so that had no effect on it. But like I said, we walked into theirs. So minimal manning. To me, the biggest hurdle from the very beginning was a language barrier with their security lead and myself at the base, She didn't speak any English.
What about Chico? Chico was there, right?
It was, but when I needed some pointed, directed questions, I needed the direct response from them, just from the security thing. So some stuff got lost in translation, but we were able to make it work. A full-bird colonel from Youngstown came down, and he was born and raised in Panama, and he spoke fluent Spanish and was just a huge asset to the team with that aspect. And so was Shirt Cortez, and there was several others that spoke Spanish
Mackie.
that came down. Yes.
Eventually, yeah.
I would like to piggyback on that real quick because from the logistics and the sustainment part of it too, the contracts that we were expecting to be in place weren't there. None of them were in place. So as far as support vehicles, support
Forklifts.
any MHE, anything support was not there. Porta potties, all that stuff. I mean, stuff that we needed to sustain a force.
And
I
that was
think
not in
that's
place.
the same thing I heard with the European trip. We had to rely on contractors for hotel
Yeah.
stuff. It'd be nice if we had our own contracting office in our wing to do that stuff for us when we do muscle movements like
100%.
this.
And,
Yeah.
and as a minimum, AFRIC needs to have contractors that
Yes,
are
sir.
smart in ETAO. 'Cause
They
this
don't?
No. This was 12th Air Force's contracting office. And I mean, what did it end up doing? We had security forces using the maintenance bobtail to run patrols because the aircraft have to be protected or patrolled 24 hours a day.
Dual purpose as the follow vehicle.
Yep, we used a Bobcat as the follow me vehicle because when you had this airfield was dark and kind of beat up on the military side, and the Spanish controllers didn't speak very good English, so we had to bring in the airlift with a follow me vehicle. So we used a Bobcat from Combat Com. You know, these are just the highlights of this innovation that we did at every turn. And that's what it was. I was so impressed with AFRIC and our airmen is, you know, they didn't have to be told what to do when they're given a problem. They solved it by creative measures. You know, talked about the fuel and buying a funnel or using the milk jug. But yeah, just things like that. We didn't really have 24-hour airfield ops, so we did multi-capable airman stuff where we marshaled aircraft in. I think Command Chief Ashley marshaled. He was supervised, of course. But just absolute incredible execution from our AFRIC airmen. And I'm just going to list some of the problems that we had to deal with. You know, security forces. You know, this was a region where we required 24-hour Raven coverage. Raven coverage is a special qualification to guard aircraft, and you were able to get a waiver on that, but they had to guard the aircraft 24 hours a day with U.S. personnel. So that was both at Lima and at Chiclayo. We almost diverted airplanes into that third base where we didn't have security forces, and you were getting in a car and about to go do about a 4-hour drive to go guard those aircraft if they diverted. They ended up not diverting, but the security forces puzzle, and I don't even want you to tell me what you did with weapons and ammo. I guess you can. Didn't you resource to the embassy?
We did. So at first, when they got to Chiclayo, we had an ammo mishap where the flight commander, there was some paperwork error, aircraft commander. We were missing some paperwork, so we had no ammo. So
there was an aircraft commander who was supposed to pick up ammo at DM. It was military ammo from a military airfield, and he refused to take it, and totally jacked his security forces ammo plan at Chiclayo.
So at 6 o'clock in the morning, I was in the gym working out and get a phone call, and they said, we don't have ammo. And so I had to contact Master Sgt. Gonzalez, now Senior Master Sgt. Gonzalez, at the time, who was at Lima. Him and Master Sgt. Bellis, I asked them to figure out a way to get me ammo from point A to point B, and I need it now. So they somehow figured out a way. They worked with the embassy and the Marines out there to get ammo. They came provided to us in Ziploc bags. They got on, I believe the flight was a 146. Was that the flight
Yeah,
they
it was
used?
the NSAV bird, the Special Ops bird, transport bird, that was down there helping us out.
So they landed there, and then during all of this, while we were there early, Colonel Leonas received an email and asked if we were armed up and carrying weapons, because no one had any clue that we were arming with weapons at the time. So we had to provide the guidance to get clearance again to have weapons while we were over in Peru, because the embassy was unaware that we were going to be guarding our Air Force assets with weapons.
Yeah.
So we were able to figure that all out within the short amount of time. But that was just the networks between Senior Master Sgt. Gonzalez and Master Sgt. Bellis developed in their time, because they got there a little bit early as well due to no space on flights. So we had I think they commercialed out to get there. So that was another interesting part. So we had security forces in Lima. So they were able to build networks while they were out there.
Yeah, we had a big load of ammo that was supposed to come out of Scott Air Force Base, but we had some type of mission change. I can't even remember the specifics because the infill was a near disaster is the best way. Diplomatic clearance issues that were not coordinated properly for the JTF. These were not AFRIC problems 100%. There were some things that we maybe caused, but it was just a constant troubleshooting. And they ended up on Delta carrying a small amount of ammo. Just you did hot ammo swaps.
So per regulations, you're allowed to carry about 5 or 11 pounds. Don't quote me on either one of those weights. So what they did is each member would carry that amount of ammo with them, and then we were able to hot swap weapons, and we still met all of AFI requirements and protection and full workloads and everything else. So we were just able to adapt and overcome, and it was just the outside box thinking of several individuals, Master Sergeant Gonzalez, like Senior Master Sergeant Gonzalez, Master Sergeant Bellis, Master Sergeant Wooden. So all of those security folks is reaching back out to Senior Master Sergeant Williams, Senior Master Sergeant Heralic, just working with all of them to come up with this great plan, and it worked.
Yep.
So just
probably not making every decision run through you. Correct. Actually doing it on their own. So that's I totally appreciated that type of leadership. I'm going to talk about the security forces thing that you did. So there was, South America has a lot of, we'll call it emotional political stuff. And I think there was a coup earlier in the year in Peru, and the opposition party, let's say, had a planned march on the 19th of July in Lima, and it was going to be tens of thousands of people, probably 50,000 people there. They were anticipating in Lima. We'd made security measures in Lima. It was nowhere near our route or our base or our lodging, but it was all mitigated in Lima. The evening of the 18th, we get word that there's going to be let's call it a mirror protest at Chiclayo. And it was going to start at the sugarcane factory and walk right by the gate. And we had zero notice. And Chief Urbano, I was highly impressed with your judgment decision making, basically came up with a mitigation plan that we're going to still go to work. So we did mission critical only to support the mission. Everybody else will stay in the hotel. Travel in civilian clothes and change, because we felt safe enough to travel in uniform initially. And we were all going to be on the base by 8 o'clock. Because the march would come by at 8:30, and it kind of blew up our travel plan, and it was, I don't want to say it was inconvenience, but it was not in accordance with every other day prior. Boom, sure enough, we executed that, and you actually ran out in front of the buses.
Yes, sir. We had myself and Colonel Diabate did the recon, so we went out a little bit earlier, and then we came back. We head up a little bit earlier just to make sure the routes were cleared. Yep. In constant contact with Colonel Leonas.
So get on base. In time, the protest did go by, and it was a peaceful protest, but I mean, you never know what could happen. It's funny, they actually walked by our hotel as well, and there's video of people who were not mission critical taking a shot at the protest. But those are the types of decisions, and I know you're obviously an expert in those types of things, but the command chief stepped up immediately and came up with an FP-Con plan. Immediately. That was awesome, and we didn't miss a sortie, and everybody was safe. But that's one example of just innovation on the spot.
And to be clear, I don't think the protest was not our presence. It was political. So it was just, we were just there at that time. It was not against
the weird thing is that there was no protest planned at Chiclayo until the evening prior. So it was just stuff like that. They were very receptive to our presence, to include, I think, the average population. We didn't, we stuck out like a sore thumb in Chiclayo. Regardless, we're Americans. Even if you were Hispanic origin, they could tell you're Americans, and they would look and look away. Tourist town, not at all. It's a blue collar working town, and they were not negative to us at all.
I mean, Keith looks and sounds a little bit like a Peruvian. Yeah.
But yeah, that's just one example, and I just wanted to highlight that Chief Urbano, was highly involved in all the security forces stuff. Quite honestly, the majority of the decisions were made by your troops down the chain, and such. Fire trucks. You need to have certain levels of fire service when you have multiple movements. And it's an Air Force regulation. We don't realize it as pilots, because when we show up, even at the first the fire truck's already there.
Yeah.
So we brought 3 fire trucks, and we're shuttling them all over the country with a C-17. Bizarre. And those things are huge. I could not believe that you could put a fire truck, a huge ass forklift, all these pallets on
and
a
C-17.
C-17. Pack it full and it's no problem.
That's cool.
Yeah. Security Forces fire trucks, the airlift puzzle, Lieutenant Colonel Iridella, and quite honestly, Colonel Schumer, my DCOM, who's a C-130 guy. He's the vice at Peterson right now. Just sorting that out daily. Just a massive, massive puzzle. And then the passports, that was probably the biggest pain, because we need maroon passports to go into South America because they're not NATO, and then they required us to have a visa, and just the logistics. Janet Zippo is the one. She's down at 10th Air Force.
She orchestrated most of that, and again, each one of these steps is roughly normally a 6 to 8 month process.
Jeez.
Somehow we got, because you think about it, it was not just our footprint, but it was a footprint plus one. So roughly 800 to 900 people, passports and visas. In case somebody fell out, you had to have you had to have a plus one.
Well, what if it was like, obviously it wasn't, what if it was like, no kidding, wartime situation, 6 or 8 months to get a passport?
That was a hot wash item. We definitely going into these countries, maybe look at some of those countries down there. As long as you have a passport and an order under 180 days, they allow you entry. In Central America, for instance, Panama and Honduras, maybe adopt that and talk about that at the beginning when we start these talks about utilizing these countries and building these relationships with them. Maybe they can help us, help them and explore those options going into it. But that's law. I mean, they would actually, I think, physically have to change their law, to make that happen. So it'd have to start well in advance.
I think I might still be signed into LUD for my 2006 trip. I never really out-processed there.
Yeah, the weird thing, the militaries of these countries were so receptive, it gave the illusion that the government was receptive as well. And it wasn't. And the embassies working with the government, and you got pushback pretty much all the time. And it wasn't negative pushback, it's just
they got laws to
bureaucracy.
enforce. Yeah, they got laws to enforce just like we do.
So the Hogs get down there, you're down there with some A-10s, some 130s, some helicopters. Tell me about the flying mission down there and how that went, and then little hub and spoke action with COM, what Halo and those guys did down there, and a little ops maintenance perspective, and what were some lessons learned?
So maintenance was supplied by, at least at the A-10 at Chiclayo, by DM. And I went out a lot and talked to them, and they're closing. Their mission's terminating. So I talked about that a lot, and was very sympathetic. And I basically said, hey, talk to Tyler. Tyler Bain went down, and he knows what's going on in maintenance, and he can talk you through the details. But I'll tell you what, so I said I might be in charge in the future, and I told them I thought about before I said that. Said, hey, I'll double bill it and bring anyone up that I can up here from your unit. That's my promise to you. And I was before I was announced to be the wing commander, but I told them that. So that was kind of interesting. It was because of the language barrier to include, obviously the pilots. They spoke English, but maybe not tactically. They had a planning day, an execution day, a planning debrief day, an execution day. So it was kind of a cycle. Very smart. We used the C-130 to shuttle the planners and the debriefers up there. And it was, DM, a guy named Ron Sveti, he had some time in 12th Air Force, he had some time in Colombia.
And ironically, he spoke Spanish.
Really?
What were the odds of that?
Yeah.
Again, back to the perfect team just coming together. I don't know how that happens.
He developed a very safe and an effective plan. The missions were basic.
Yeah.
We'll call it tactical BSA. We FACT. Their Su-25s lasted a week, and then they broke. And then we did KT-1s, which are the newer Korean small attack aircraft. Very positive interaction with them. And when it came to mission, and we did FARPing, that was where we'd go up to that northern base, and we'd get the C-130 come from Lima, load the armaments from Moody, the Moody team. They were awesome. And then take the armors and the gas up to that base, and we'd FARP.
Chiclayo.
Go from Chiclayo to Talara. So basically it was Lima South, Chiclayo Middle, and Talara North. And turning and operating out of Talara, I actually, to try to put this in perspective, when we were in Ecuador, and it was just kind of a jungle triangle, but when we stretched out for Peru, because Lima and Chiclayo was 250 miles, and then I think Talara was like another 170 miles. So these were we were stretched out. And I took those distances and took it over to China. And Lima is kind of like Manila, and Clark Air Force Base. So, we go and we do our MOB at our main operating base at Clark Air Force Base. There's a small international airport that looks just like Chiclayo on the northern part of that Philippine island. I don't know what the name of the island is. And then the distance into the South China Sea from Chiclayo to Tolar is the same as this island called Sparta or something like that. And there's a jungle airstrip there. We could get in there, a C-130 could get in there, and we could turn out of there. So we kind of showed the stretch that we could do with A-10s only, because that airfield on that island is so bad. And we could run anti-boat with rockets. We could run some type of CSAR mission out of there, with guys that maybe got shot down in the ocean. But we could affect any type of Taiwan engagement with this model right here. And when these bases gets whaled, okay, then we can go out of Japan and kind of stretch from Japan to the southeast, kind of do the same things and, fly over Taiwan to affect the fight. So, that's kind of what I saw as something that I didn't perceive initially, how this small wing could move and move people, move equipment, and affect the fight like that. It was pretty neat to see that. But our objectives were partnership, and I'll tell you what, great friends down there. The partnership was phenomenal. They loved us. They had a family day, and we were we were the heroes of the family day. That's why the culture is so similar to us. And I remember that when we said that this is the first time A-10s have been south of the equator, they immediately sent 5 generals up to the base from Lima. And no kidding, the day prior they had a band practice, and it was like the biggest ceremony, and there was a line of saluting when they came off, and you had to look them in the eye. You were directed to look them in the eye when you saluted them. And it went from the super formal arrival to when I'm giving a tour of the A-10, being translated by one of the guys there. His name was Fidel Castro, no kidding, a colonel in the Air Force who went to Montgomery. He went to Air War College.
Oh, he did?
In the United States, yeah. So he's a big Chiefs fan and stuff like that. It's kind of funny. But anyways, these generals, who some of them were Army generals and some of them were fighter pilots, went to, it's like the super formal look in the eye. They're giving me hugs, and, I'm sitting on the rail with their chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff equivalent, and he's just talking to me about being an Army officer, and he loves the Su-25s because they protect his men, and it went from this super formal ceremony to this partnership that was personal. And then you didn't get to go to that, Keith, but it went to the same when we had our VIP day.
Is that when Radcliffe was down there?
Yep, when General Radcliffe came down there, it went from the super formal, stood at attention for an hour, no kidding, and then marched. Kind of. I just said, follow me, and we walked out to the big photo, which is that 20 minutes, that photo. You didn't go, you missed it.
I did not go.
Yeah. Keith was working problems, or had dengue fever, one or the other.
It's both.
Yes, I know you were working problems. We went from the super formal, the ambassador was there. They were showing their military, their Secretary of Defense, our airplanes and stuff like that, to we ended up being in the fighter bar with a bunch of fighter pilots, and it just went from this formal to this informal, and we were having toasts, and that's where I got that Su-22 patch.
Yeah.
Su-20, no, was it I think it was the Su-22, but just partnership was easy. And then can an AFRIC leadership team plan and do that? And it was a challenge. I shortchanged you because I was your vice, and I was doing this probably at the end 75% of the time. If it wasn't a wing emergency, I was probably doing Patriot Fury. And obviously these guys, we had Zero. He's a group commander, full-time commander. Keith was the IG and the LRS commander, and he was doing this, taken away from some of our normal jobs. It was a challenge, and I'm just talking about our team. There's other guys that had the same draw. We didn't get resourced properly.
Yeah, that's kind of what I briefed to General Healy in your absence at the end, when we can't just keep pulling from wings like this to plan these kind of trips.
And there's there's people that are twiddling their thumbs working from home right now that could have helped, and we're experts. And then the other two things were ACE, and just talking about the stories with the fuel, no contracts using. We were doing ACE beyond just that FARP plan that was planned at every turn. And then we had some medical ACE stuff too, and that maybe was not at the level, but when it came to aviation operations and ACE, AFRIC should be proud. And then I'll tell you what, we did an AEW, all AFRIC. Never been done before.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a TDY to Jaded Thunder or a TDY to Nellis. This was a TDY to we'll call it a very austere country in a lot of ways, and under-resourced all the way. We probably did. No one in the Air Force has ever done this.
Bob, from a PA perspective, did the Peruvian television, did they cover that down there? Do they have TV people, and how'd they cover it?
We did get some coverage. We got a lot of attention right when I first got there. I had taken some photos and released them and posted them to our Facebook. And apparently the commander of the base at Chiclayo called his security lieutenant in and just chewed her out. Like, where are these photos coming from? Do we have some kind of leak on this base? And so I was real quick told to stand down.
Colonel Schultz was down there? Angry?
I stood down for a day while that was resolved, and they were assured that yes, these were officially released photos. We had gone through all the proper practices and everything was good to go. And after that, they were just wonderful. The local PA guys took me in. They were walking around with me. There was their 82nd anniversary celebration for the Peruvian Air Force. And one of their guys just grabbed me and was like, come along, take pictures with me, get up here where we can get better shots. It was fantastic. And we got some traction on local Facebook pages, a little bit of local media action. Nobody came out to the base that was media like they did in Greece. There was a lot of local media and a lot of tail spotters who wanted to come out for that. But I didn't see any of that in Peru. I was a little bit surprised, especially with the A-10s the first time being south of the equator. I thought we would end up with more like news media type folks.
Yeah, I think they're concerned more about general living. They're not. At least where we were in Chiclayo, Lima, is an international airport, so an airplane's not going to draw a lot of attention. But our fighters, when we were getting gas, but I think they're more focused on, they're obviously not very. It's poverty, and I kind of, if anything hit me was how much trash and how not to the same living conditions. And you talked about that when you came back from Honduras.
Yes.
That kind of hit me. So I don't think they were as concerned about a couple airplanes on the ramp. Last, I want to talk about the lodging because I've never seen Keith so spooked. So when 12th Air Force went down there, they somehow created a contract with a handshake that we're all going to check in on the 24th of June and leave on the
25th of July.
Yeah, and no one was there on the 24th of June. So they charged all of our guys full. Even if you showed up on the 8th of July, you checked in on the 24th of June. And Keith tried to get that resolved over and over to the point that he thought he was going to get arrested. And I remember, I'm not joking. I've never seen Keith kind of get shuddered when this police officer walked into the hotel. And,
it wasn't quite that way, but they were wanting to also charge people that didn't show. So the people that didn't, some of us did not get our visa passports done, and we had to go without. So even their rooms, and that was the part I believe where we had the general manager and I had a conversation, and it was a little spooky. I'll just leave it at that.
A little heated?
But fortunately, I got the AFRC's lead FM planner on the line that night. He worked some issues out and came up with a plan. And the hotel was acceptable to that, so it kind of defused that situation.
Do you think that's why a bunch of your guys got roofied then?
Yeah, I don't know about the roofie part, but it did get real for a few minutes.
I called this a tweener. It wasn't a combat deployment, but the conditions were more like combat than a standard TDY. And we had a guy get mugged and rolled down in Lima, a lieutenant colonel, orthopedic surgeon. And he woke up in a ditch with no phone and no, he's lucky.
But he was out by himself late night.
He made a mistake.
Yeah.
He made a mistake, but we had pilots from DM get drugged, and they were with one of our pilots, Jekyll.
Yeah.
And these guys were lieutenant colonels, former squad commanders. They weren't drinking too much. They're also airline pilots, so that they're used to traveling international, and they were targeted. So it's not a vanilla AO, that's for sure.
You definitely had to keep your eyes open.
We had great security measures at Chiclayo where not to go, and I think everybody complied with those. Lima was a little less controlled because it's a huge international destination.
And Bob, you did both Greece and this, just like Sal did. You did both Europe and then this.
I did, yeah. It was a busy spring and summer, I'll tell you that. But it was a great
Worthwhile.
experience, very
Yeah.
worthwhile. The crash course in Spanish was lovely. I know probably twice as much Spanish as I did when I got there. At least by the end, I could order a hamburger without Google Translate. So that's something.
That's funny. I'll tell you guys this, just from my perspective, a year and a half of planning from the three of you, I would tell you, Sal, that you're in the MSG SEL position probably because of the work you did on this trip and the work you did in Greece. Keith, you're probably in the MSG job because of the work you did, not only because of the work you did with this, but what you did in Panama, what you did on this trip, and what you've shown outside of the wing that you can do in leading people and solving problems. And I would say, Rio, to take this challenge on, and General Radcliffe watched you work, it's a big, not only the only reason, but it's probably a big reason you're taking over for me here in 2 weeks, because of the job that you did as an Air Force Reserve leader to show that you can take and just not quit. You had chances to cancel, and you kept driving. And I think it's a big reason why you're getting the opportunity to lead the 442nd Fighter Wing next.
I appreciate that. And you know what? It's making decisions without asking your boss is as long as they're not criminal or completely stupid decisions, that's what you got to do. You know, we can't, you talk about that, we can't make every decision for people down there. Do it on your, make decisions on your own. Make decisions on your own. They're probably going to be plus or minus 25% good to go, and you'll readjust if necessary. So that's I think that's what General Radcliffe liked.
Yeah, and I'm
making decisions.
I don't think that I had nothing to do with it. I don't think you ran anything by me on this trip for a year.
Yeah.
You keep me up to date. This is going on, but you got it, and because I trust you, and that's the way that if you're leading people, that's the way you should lead
I think
people.
General Radcliffe got that same vibe because I tell him this is what we're doing, and he's like, okay,
Yeah.
I couldn't run everything by him. It changed every day.
Any parting shots?
Sal, you got to throw out, so exit surveys were all positive. Everybody came out of there with a smile. It wasn't the best place to go, but everybody was fired up. Mission, and the whole thing was a positive.
I think just to back up what you were just saying, as far as all of us, we all grew because of this experience, and it wasn't just the people at this table. Everybody in play grew from that experience, and I guarantee if they were here right now, they would tell you the same thing. Everybody grew from this.
And if the bell went off and they asked us to go set up a base in the middle of Jordan or Indo-PACOM or EUCOM, and we said, boom, you guys are going, the stuff that you learned on this trip would help that trip tremendously, right? That's why we do this stuff.
Tremendously.
Cool. Bob, thanks for having us on the podcast. It went a little long. It might be the longest we've had, but to recap literally a trip they spent a year and a half planning, and with all this stuff, we didn't get into a lot of the other stuff that we could have, but what a good recap. I really wanted to sit down with these guys and say thank you, and thanks for setting this up. And until next time, we'll be on with General Sabrick and Coach Chief Bluto on the next one. All right, thanks.
Good. Thanks for listening.